Hello and welcome to our today's Santander webinar. I am Eric Hoffman and I'm the Global Head of Santander's Export Finance Agency team. Together with my colleagues, I'm very proud to have caught the interest of so many of you, our clients, to participate in this virtual event. We are still facing an extraordinary situation in which COVID-19 pandemic does not allow us to be in close physical contact with you. However, we have all adapted very rapidly to the new normal and hence have become experts in video conferencing. But the virus did not only affect our daily lives. It has also been an accelerator of a downturn in the global economy, so also in Brazil. Almost all companies have faced unexpected difficulties. Sharp decrease in sales and hence in cash flows, need for liquidity, downgrade in rating and cease of access to credit lines and capital markets, or at least significantly higher cost of credit. On the other hand, ECA-supported loans have historically proven to be available during crisis times, supporting the industry with high loan volumes, long tenors at stable pricing levels based upon a sovereign backing. This is why we believe our today's workshop, Export and Agency Finance Trends, with a special focus on Brazil, will give you some value. We would like to target this theme from both angles, viewing it from a Brazilian buyer as well as from the perspective of an international supplier of services and goods. As such, I would like to introduce you in the following short video slots to my colleagues who support the ECA business within the Brazilian trade corridors. Let me say goodbye for now and please enjoy the event.
Hi everyone, I'm Jean-Baptiste Piet, Head of Export and Agency Finance. It's a pleasure to meet you all virtually. I'm in particular responsible for all the business with the DC-based agencies, including US Exim Bank, the entities from the World Bank Group, and the Inter-American Development Bank. 2020 has been a very interesting year. The historical US Exim Bank 7-year reauthorization, together with the launching of the Strengthening American Competitive Initiatives, are major events that will give US Exim Bank more stability and relevance within this renewed mandate. As part of this renewed mandate, US Exim Bank will dedicate also 20% of its total financing authority. We're talking here about $27 billion to US exports that compete with China. Brazil is undoubtedly a core destination and high priority for US Exim Bank. In fact, Brazil and the United States signed a few days ago a memorandum of understanding that would allow US Exim Bank to finance $1 billion worth of exports to and projects in Brazil. Key US industries include renewable energy, wireless communication, biotechnology, semiconductor, artificial intelligence, water treatments, financial technologies, and space technology. The multilateral institutions from the World Bank Group and the Inter-American Development Bank have also stepped up during this crisis and have become very relevant to support the financing not only of major infrastructure projects, but also in assisting corporations with their working capital needs and COVID-19 related expenses. Let me finish by saying that the US-Brazil connectivity is strong. The relevance of the DC-based agencies has never been so high in these difficult times. Please let us know how we can build on this existing momentum and assist you with your financing needs.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Sunjung Lee. I'm heading Asian ECA business based in Santander, Hong Kong. We understand Asia is the largest trade partner of Brazil nowadays. Therefore, there are so many professional, capable Asian exporters and experienced Asian investors who have great interest in Brazil. Various sectors such as infrastructure, agribusiness, oil and gas, water treatment, renewable energy, etc. Please note that in Asia, we have innovative Asian ECAs who are ready to support their exporters and investors, such as Sinosure from China, K-Shore and KXIM from Korea. If you have any questions about Asian ECA business, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you.
European companies are among the largest exporters and investors in Brazil. Their activity and presence in industries such as automotive, aerospace, pharmaceutical and medical equipment, transportation, and others are key drivers of the Brazilian economy and will help to a quick recovery after COVID. In Santander, we support our clients on both sides of the ocean, and we want to be with you for all your export credit agency needs. We have a very close relationship with all European export credit agencies and other stakeholders that will assure that your projects in Brazil are financed with success.
Hi, I'm Sergio Margucci, the Head of Export and Agency Finance of Santander in Brazil. As you can see by my colleagues, we have a great franchise, being the ECA leading bank in the world. I am proud to tell you that we have been servicing our clients in several remarkable deals, not only for large companies, but we are also strictly delivering export and agency finance transactions for small companies, medium companies, and governments as well. We are the most international of the local banks and the most local of the international banks, bring together FX capabilities, DCM, project finance, rates, and whatever you need for your business. Thank you very much for your presence. Enjoy the event that we prepared especially for you, and keep counting on Santander as your one-stop shop, no matter in which part of the world you are. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you very much for joining us in this event. I'm pleased to invite Louise Mazzagon. Since November of 2018, Mazzagon is the head of Treasury Business of Santander in Brazil, including all trading activities of FX, interest rates, credits, equities, and commodities. He's the responsible for sales activity for all segments of the Bank of Treasury products. Mazzagon is graduated in Business Administration with emphasis in derivatives, corporate finance, and capital markets. Mazzagon, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Sergio, for the introduction, and most of all, thanks for all of our clients that have joined us. It's a great opportunity to be able to talk to the exports and imports clients that are a very, very important portion of the Brazilian economy. I'll try to make a 30 minutes presentation focused on the perspective of the market, especially on the FX, which was a big challenge that Sergio presented to me, because predicting FX in Brazil is the Achilles heels of all economists. It's a very, very tough market, as you guys who work with it, who need to execute FX transactions every day, are more than aware of. Brazil is very volatile, and recently has been even more volatile. I'd like to share a quick presentation, and I'll start with the view that the FX in Brazil, as all currencies in the world, it's mainly impacted by global trends. So it's important that we see what's happening with the dollar and with all the major currencies throughout the world, and then we can focus here on the idiosyncrasies of the local market and how we behave in relative to this global trend. Okay. The most important thing in the world right now is the pandemic. We are all aware of it, and the most important thing that's happening right now is the second wave, which is no longer a risk; it's a fact. We're seeing cases booming all over the world. Europe has been the first. Now the US, it's in a very, very critical situation on this second wave. But there are things that minimize the impact of the second wave compared to what happened to all the global markets and all the global economies in March and April of this year. First is that the population is more used and the treatments are better. So even though we are entering into a second lockdown phase in Europe, it's a much milder lockdown with less things being closed, And as you can see by the lockdown index, even we have some small spikes, especially in Western Europe, but throughout the world, the mobility is a little bit much better than what it was during the February and March big lockdowns that we had. Okay. And oops, just one second. Okay. And the good news and what's also happening on that front is the vaccine. Okay, so we already have 6 candidate vaccines that are already approved from limited use. And last week and this week, we have very good news from Pfizer and Moderna, who have over 90% success rates. And we expect large-scale vaccination in the developed countries to start in December this year, something that's going to last for, I don't know, 1 or 2 quarters, so that we have a good portion of the population vaccinated. But this brings confidence that this second wave is not going to have the big impact in the economy as it had in the beginning of the year with the first wave. The second big trend, and what has been a boost to the markets recently, as we all have seen, has been the election in the US. And especially looking at the currency markets, the trend has been of a weaker dollar. And why is that? Because Biden's approach is much less noisy on trade. He wants to build partnerships. He wants to rebuild all the global organizations, starting by the OMC, having more power with the United Nations, and build more of a cooperative world and bring back globalization, which is a very, very important trend, especially for the external sectors of the economies. And so this generates a little bit of flows out of the dollars and into the other currencies, because it would help the entire world against the US. So we're seeing this weaker dollar trends. Apart from that, the second biggest impacting is the fiscal stimulus that we have seen throughout the globe. Okay, so interest rates are as low as they have ever been. And you can see this is in all the countries. Each country in the world has made a stimulus package. And as you can see, as percentage of GDPs, this varies a lot, but very, very big numbers, especially looking at the developed economy, with the US with 11% of GDP as stimulus package, Japan over 10%, and looking at Brazil, 8.7% of GDP in stimulus package. Okay, this has been a big impact on primary results, but it's a temporary deficit, which is something that the developed countries can afford. Looking at Brazil, we'll have a deeper analysis of that going forward in the presentation. Also, we had the return of the big asset purchase by the central banks in a number way bigger than we have seen before. So like 2-3 folds bigger. And this is injecting a lot of liquidity into the market. And this liquidity, of course, should generate some sort of inflation. We're not seeing products or service inflation because demand is still repressed by the lockdowns, but what we're seeing is asset priced inflation, and this generating a lot of imbalances in the market, as we have seen with the quick and rapid recovery of all the equity indexes in the world. But looking at real economy, when you see the PMIs, which is the Purchaser Manufacturer Index, it has been a V-shaped recovery. Okay, we're not back to where we were in the top of 2018, but that was not COVID. The whole economy and the whole industrial sectors of the developed markets has been coming down for 2 years. And now what we're seeing is a recovery trend. If you jump the COVID V, you can see that the trend is still there. Now looking at the weaker dollar, and this is a trend that we have been seeing for a long period, the Trump administration has made the dollar much stronger than it has been in the past years, okay? What we are seeing here in this graph, it's 50 years dollar against its currencies, these partner currencies on a trade-weighted basis. And as you can see, we are at very high levels of strength in the dollars. And looking the tendency for the dollar to weaken a little bit had already started. And we expect to see that this trend will be reinforced by the new policies from the Biden administration. Against the euro, against the yen, that we're already seeing euros at last year's highs, and also against emerging market currencies. But then when you go to emerging markets, we have our own idiosyncrasies, and even though the world is in a trend of a weaker dollar, we're seeing the BRL at historical highs. Historical lows, the BRL, right? The dollar against the BRL at historical highs. But when you look into the fundamentals, how is the Brazilian economy behaving in the external sector? Okay, we have a current account balance that has been recovering, especially because of the decrease in imports, but the number of the flow of dollars into the country has been positive. When you look at the export sector, even though it's a little bit less than what it was in 2018, the trend of the last 3 months is very positive. And why is that? Is because of the agricultural sector, okay? Brazil has been focusing on the agricultural sector for the past 10 years, and the growth has been phenomenal. The productivity of our farms has more than doubled in this period, and the export numbers now represent the most important sector of the economy. Brazil is a huge exporter both to China and to Europe, to the Middle East, and we compete very, very well, as we are the #1 producer of sugar, coffee, #2 in soybeans, #1 in cattle. Just for the swine, where we're #5, but this is mainly because of restriction that we have in the European Union that jeopardizes our ability to export there. So Brazil is a powerhouse in the agricultural sector. The commodities prices have been very high in this past months after the huge stimulus that we have seen and all the asset prices inflation that we have observed in the market in the last couple of months. So the trade balance of Brazil is positive, and the trend is also for improvement. But how do you see the financial side, right? Because we may have been positive in trade, but bad in the financial, and this is not the case also. So the current account deficit has been coming down because of the improvement in exports. Foreign direct investments, it has reduced a little bit. If you see the gray line in the left hand side graph, it has reduced a little bit, but still it's on the long-term trend of slowly going up. So we have a positive number in FDI of a constant investment directly into the country. And looking at portfolio investments, this is where we had a problem, and this has a lot to do with interest rates. Since 2014, Brazil has been in a reduction of interest rates all the way from close to 20% to 2%, where we are now, very, very low rates, not only for Brazilian standards, but also for emerging market standards. And this has moved portfolio investments out of the country, okay? Recently, so after COVID, we had this big bump on the gray line that you can see in the beginning of 2020, but it was a V-shaped recovery. We have portfolio investments much, much better than where it was. These numbers is mostly of fixed income investments, but November is already showing a huge inflow in equities. After the US election and all the rallies that we have seen in equities throughout the world, Brazil was no exception to that. And we have had a lot of inflows, more than 5 billion reais, just in the month of November to buy Brazilian equities. So portfolio investments is also healthy. FDI is healthy. The trade balance is healthy. Why is the currency not appreciating, right? And this is the trick. And this is the number that we have been trying to find the reasons and all the explanations throughout that. And currently we see two main aspects for this, okay? Okay, before I go, just a little bit, how devalued is the Brazilian reais, okay? So this is a model that we go back 30 years and we try to calculate the real exchange rate discounted by inflation. So we take inflation out of the equation and we make it on a trade-weighted basis. So it's not only the dollars, it's all of our international partners on a trade balance weighted. So Brazil is as devalued as it has ever been, only taking away 2002, which were the first election of Lula, but it was a quick period and we quickly recovered. And we are now, it has been a trend since 2011 of the devaluation of the BRL. But as you can see on this straight line of 2020, we believe that it has been an overshooting of where the BRL should be, looking at the global trends and how the trade balance and the external accounts of the country are behaving. We also make some models where we try to explain where the BRL should be. So this is a correlation model where we take into account the terms of trade, some currency pairs, the interest rate differential between Brazil and the other countries, the local stock exchange, the Ibovespa, and the S&P. And this model has been fitting very well. As you can see, the model is the red curve and the real rate is the black curve. We can see that for the past 2-3 years, it has fitted pretty well. But just after the COVID, the currency traded erratically, very, very volatile, and on a devaluing trend that the other market factors do not explain. And we try to change a little bit what do we put into this model in order to explain the recent movement. And what was the success was by changing, if you look at this new model, where we change the equity indexes, we take it out of the model and we put the CDS. And when we put the CDS, we see that the model has a much devalued price for the BRL in comparison to the exchange. And what does the CDS reflect? Is the credit risk of the country. So the conclusion that we take out of this is that the first factor that is negatively impacting the BRL is the fiscal risk. As we have said in the previous slides, Brazil had spent a lot in the fight against the COVID, as a percentage of GDP, much closer to what the developed nations have spent. And we had already started on a much weaker fiscal position. So prior to COVID, Brazil was already at a 10%, 80% debt to GDP level on a gross basis, close to between 50 and 60 on a net basis, because Brazil has around $350 billion in reserves. But it's a much indebted country in comparison to other emerging markets that have the same risk profile as we do. And then looking at this model, we can see that right now the BRL is very close to where the model predicted it. And so we believe that what's pricing the market and what's taking the market to this over devalued level, as we have seen, it's because of the fiscal situation. How much and where has Brazil spent in its fight against COVID? Okay. This graph it's very interesting. This graph on the left. So Brazil has made some emergency aid to poor people at an amount of 600 reais, which is around between $100 and $150 per month, which is very high for Brazilian standards, and it has been reduced to 300 reais for the past 3 months. Okay, but what does this mean for the population? The gray lines that you see is the real wage plus the social benefits that exist in the country. Prior to the pandemic, so the purchase power, how much money does the population have? How much money do they earn on a monthly basis? The red bars that you can see on the second quarter of 20 and throughout 2020 is the stimulus package that the government has made. So on an average, the Brazilian population started making more money after the pandemic than before. As you can see, the private sector, the gray bars, it has come down significantly because this is the impact of the reduction of GDP, of the closing of the shops and everything. So the disposable income from the private sector was very low, but the amount that was complemented by the government was much higher than the loss that existed in the real sector, on the private sector. So the government has given to the population more than they have lost. So people started living and having more money, living better and having more money after the pandemic than before. This generated some discrepancies in the market. This generated some inflation on specific products. So food has been really impacted in short-term inflation. We have seen the service sector very low inflation, because this is where there is no offer and there's no demand, because people are not going to lunch or dinner outside of the house. But I don't know, the electronics has also boomed. People are buying new cell phones with the aids because they are making more money than they did before. And this generates a big challenge for the government on how to withdraw this stimulus and put the fiscal situation back in place. Because as you can imagine, this amount of money distributed widely throughout the population, more than 60 million people were benefited by these vouchers that we called Corona vouchers here in Brazil. It's very difficult from a political standpoint. Now, looking at how much Brazil invested and where's the position where we started, we can clearly see on a graph in comparison to other developing economies that we started from a much worse situation, which is the x-axis on the graph. Brazil is at 100%, close to 100% debt to GDP forecast for the end of 2020. And we have spent 9% of GDP on stimulus and aids. Okay, so we started from a bad fiscal situation and we spend more than our average peers throughout the world. So this put Brazil in a very dangerous situation for a developing economy that's having debt to GDP close to 100%. Looking again at the fiscal scenario, as you can see, we have had deficits for 6 years prior to the pandemic. And now with the situation, we expect to have an additional 5 to 6 years of new deficits, with 2020 reaching 12.4% of GDP. Okay, so total 13 years of deficits. And what worries is what would happen with the debt level of the country, and how would we manage exiting the stimulus and making the reforms that the country need in order to stabilize its debt level. Okay, so what worries the market and what takes the price of the currency where it is this gray line. If we assume that the government does not take out the stimulus and keeps spending 300 reais a month for 60 million people and does not make any reform, we will breach the spending cap, which is a constitutional amendment that limits the amount of expenditures that the government can have, but debt to GDP will balloon to 160%. But this is not our base case, okay? So this is what's priced in the market. But what we believe is going to happen. Brazil always plays by going to the edge of the cliff, but we never jump. This has been the historical scenario for the past 50 years, okay? So we believe, and this is our base case scenario, that the government will implement much important reforms, administrative reforms, tax reforms that we're still missing, and we will be able to grow again, generate new revenues, and we'll stabilize that to GDP level in about 7 years at 105% of GDP. This all coming down after that. Okay, so this is our base case, and this is why we believe that currently the currency is too devalued. The dollar is overvalued against the BRL. The second thing that has been impacting the market is a very technical issue. Okay, so the fiscal issue is a fundamental issue, and then on top of that we have a very technical issue. And what is that? is what we call the overhedge. The overhedge is a tax hedge that banks in Brazil had to do. And the BCB, the Brazilian Central Bank, changed this tax regulation, and it generated a huge demand for banks to buy dollars in Brazil. Okay, I will not get into the tax technicalities of why the banks need to buy the dollars. We can get into those details if you want. I'm available for explanations, and you can contact Sergio and the team to organize calls to go into deeper details, but it's a very, very technical issue. But what happened is that the central bank, with this regulation that they issued in March, in the middle of the pandemic, it forced local banks to buy about 30 billion reais, 30 billion reais, $30 billion of FX in the middle of the biggest crisis that the country has seen in the past 20 years. We do not understand why the central bank changed its regulation, but this is a fact. And as you can see in this graph, what the banks have to do is that we need to reduce the capital that we have allocated to our foreign branches, and then with that, reduce the hedge that we have for these foreign capitals. The amount of foreign capitals, and you can see this number from the publications of the current account from the central bank, Brazilian investment abroad, which is the gray line, and the overhedge, which is the red line, that's very correlated with this investment abroad. The local banks have already bought from around 60 billion, and now we are at 37. So almost 27 billion reais dollars have already been bought by the banks. We believe there is still between 10 to 15 billion dollars that will need to be bought by the banks before year end. So this is a huge outflow, and this technical outflow has been pressuring the currency significantly. The blue line, which is the BRL, of course, this is impacted by the pandemic, but it definitely was accelerated by this move of this big reduction in foreign investments and the consequent hedges that the banks need to do. Okay, what this brings us to, we still have 10 to 15 billion dollars that will need to be bought until year end. But yesterday, the central bank announced that they may provide the market with a hedge for this outflow. Okay, I say may because in the communication they showed that they have the ability to sell these dollars to the market. They have not announced any amount, but they will monitor that if this flows impacts the currency more than it should, then they will sell the dollars. They left all their doors open, but at least they made an announcement which was important to the market to balance this huge outflow that would generate imbalances in the currency prices. But the good thing is that after this, we have a much, much cleaner market. So looking at 2020, how do we see in terms of effects? We have a very, very positive view, okay? So these are Santander forecasts. Okay, we can get into the details of the other variables, but if you look at the FX rate, taxa de câmbio, dollar real for the end of the period, we expect after our last revision on the right-hand side, the right column, we expect to close this year at 530, already better than what we are right now. We are at 540, even if we have this $10 billion flows. But we expect to close 2021 at 460, and by 2022 be back to 415. And this is with all the fundamentals that we have said. Very, very strong external sector, both in the trade side and in the financial side. A global devaluation trend for the dollar, and the clean out of the technical factors that has been pushing the dollar higher, which is the overhedge. Of course, as all economists would say, we have on the other hand, the big risk to this assumption is the fiscal side. These assumptions, they take into consideration that the Brazilian government will do its homework on the fiscal side, will pass the important tax and administrative reforms that we need, and also will not extend much longer the AIDS as the vaccination is approaching, and the economy should be sustained by its own feet. Okay, so I think this is it. Thank you very much for listening to us and to our views. I think we have some good views for Brazilian importers. If you are an exporter, I would recommend that you take advantage of these prices and hedge. The market is there. We have very developed derivatives market that can allow for long-term, short-term, big volume hedges. And we as Santander are here to help you on that front. Okay. Thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce Marta Siller. Marta is the Special Secretary of the PPI program, which is the public and private partnership of the federal government. Prior to this role, Marta held several positions in the regulation of the aviation sector in Brazil, being the first woman nominated the CEO of Infraero, which is the Brazilian holding companies for public airports. Marta holds a master's degree in economics from the University of Brasilia, and she also holds a double degree in economics and law. Marta, thank you very much for joining us and looking forward to hear your views on the Brazilian infrastructure economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, always with excellent presentations in Santander. Thank you for the invitation. I have some slides to share with you. Let's see if it works. Okay, is it working? Okay, thank you. So, Louise has talked a lot about the reforms agenda and how important it is for Brazil. Certainly for Brazilian government, all those reforms are priorities, and we've been working hard to approve them. We have, right now in Brazil, we're going through elections for mayors, and in the beginning of next year, we'll have important elections also for the presidents of the lower and upper house in Congress. And we believe those months are very important for us to understand the scenario we'll have next year for the advance on this reforms agenda. So the pension reform is done. It wasn't easy. It was a huge reform with big results in terms of savings for the next years. And in terms of giving back to Brazil, its fiscal, let's say, credibility in terms of being able to sustain its public policies in the long term. So it was a very important reform. And of course, we're very used to look at what hasn't been done already, but it is always important to show the great homework that has been done in terms of the pension reform. The tax reform is being discussed right now in Congress. It is a reform that everybody knows is needed, but we have different views on how it should be done. It's not easy to have a tax reform in a moment like this, in a moment where the states and municipalities in Brazil are scared of losing revenues. So it is a delicate issue, but we all know how important it is, and we really hope we can get to some interesting results next year. The administrative reform also goes in the same way as the pension reform, in the sense of making this spending of government more efficient. We spend a lot, we're not efficient with our expenditures. So we have important discussions on that issue going on also in government and Congress. And we have what I call infrastructure reform. That is not only one bill, but many bills that are being discussed in Brazilian Congress right now. And that change important things on Brazilian law for different sectors of infrastructure. So 2020 was a very important year for Brazil in terms of basic sanitation. because we have approved this legal framework that opens the market for private investments. So when we look at the numbers of sanitation in Brazil, we realize how much work and how much we need investments in this sector. And we realized that the numbers of people that still don't get the sewage collection and treatment in Brazil are huge. We're talking about 100 million people. It's half the population of the country. So how did we get to those numbers in 2020? When we look at airports, we see investments, we see modernization. When we look at energy in Brazil, when we look at so many infrastructure sectors, telecom, we see investments and improvement. And when we look at sanitation, we don't. So the main answer to that is because Brazil was focusing too much on public investments in this sector. And now it's even a worse scenario since we don't have the fiscal conditions of invest with public money on basic sanitation, and we need more than $100 billion investments in this sector. So yes, we need to have private investments. We have conditioned to do that through PPPs, through privatizations. It is already happening in Brazil, but what we needed at first was to have a new legal framework that allowed the government to do those changes. So a big thing for us to celebrate in 2020 is the approval of this new legal framework going in this direction of reform in the infrastructure sector as well. Then I point some important bills that are being discussed. Some of them have already been voted in one of the houses, just as the new gas market that is very important also to attract investments to the transportation infrastructure of gas in Brazil, to open this market for private investors. We have the modernization of electric power sector bill also being discussed, oil and gas production, concessions and PPPs in Brazil, the modernizing of this legal framework, environmental licensing, railways authorization, cabotage, that has been discussed a lot the last days, and we hope to have this vote happening soon. Infrastructure debentures as well. The national post that we must be sending the bill to Congress in the next weeks. That's for our big SOE, our national post privatization to happen. And we have the privatization of Eletrobras as well, a very important bill that is being discussed in Congress and that we need to move forward with this project. So besides all this work that is being done in terms of reforms, reviewing the legislation in Brazil, going forward with important bills in Congress, we have a great effort from the federal government to develop PPPs and privatizations in Brazil. And that happens a lot through PPI, that is the investment program, partnership program. We are linked to the Ministry of Economy in Brazil, but we work together with all the ministries that have infrastructure portfolio so that we can attract more investors, national and international investors, to those assets in Brazil. So we are a great hub for investments, for the monitoring, the transparency, the credibility of this portfolio. And we work a lot in the coordination with our ministries and agencies, and also with our court of accounts, with the Congress, with the financial agents, multilateral organizations. So a lot of work to move forward with this agenda, where we believe that the private sector should be the great responsible for developing infrastructure for Brazil, with the great contracts, with great revenues, with great return rates, and with the size of a portfolio that Brazil can present to investors. We are huge as a country. When we talk about infrastructure, I'll show you some slides. We're not preparing one airport PPP, one PPP on energy or road. We have many projects going on each of those sectors. So the opportunities Brazil present to the world today in terms of long-term investment in infrastructure is huge. And since PPI has been created, we already moved forward with 187 auctions and projects that were concluded. And that brings to Brazil $142 billion investments, some already happening and some will happen in the 20-30 year contracts that we have ahead. So this is very important to improve Brazilian infrastructure, our competitiveness, and not restrain the fiscal complexity we have and that Louise talked so much about. So since we have issues on having public investments, the fact that the government is putting a lot of energy in this program and attracting private investments to infrastructure is fundamental. And we also have important fees and bonuses collected for government because of those auctions, and that also help the development of other public policies in Brazil. So last year, we had 36 auctions in infrastructure in Brazil to attract private sectors to ports, to the energy sector with generation opportunities, transmission lines opportunities. We had a very important railway auction, and Brazil had been years without going through railway opportunities. So now the government is very committed with railway auctions, bringing private investors to the railway sector. We had a highway auction as well, with important capex, almost $500 million capex only in this highway. 12 airports last year. We had the auction of 12 airports, 12 important airports, and investors also from many countries participated in this auction. Mining opportunity, oil and gas opportunity, and last year was a very fruitful year in Brazil for oil and gas. Let's say it was a good opportunity since this year things complicated, not only because of the crisis, but also because of the price of the oil and the exchange rate. So it was a good thing for us to have those auctions happening last year. And 2020, of course, we had coronavirus. It wasn't expected. It got some of our projects delayed since we had to do feasibility studies, engineering analysis, licenses that we had to postpone since we couldn't travel, consultants couldn't go around for a while. But the portfolio continued to be a priority. We've been investing a lot also to help the states and the Brazilian municipalities to move forward with the PPP agenda. So not only the assets of the federal government, as we've seen mostly in 2019, but each time more the federal government helping the states and municipalities, doing the homework for them in terms of analyzing the assets, doing the feasibility studies, engineer studies, economic studies, helping the states and municipalities with their public consultation and all the steps needed by Brazilian law to move forward with the PPP or a privatization. And that's why we had so many important auctions this year in sanitation sector and also in public lighting sector that were all structured by the federal government. So you can see almost $200 million investments that will happen in the public street lighting sector in important cities in Brazil, 6 different cities that were structured by Brazilian federal government, whether by Caixa Econômica Federal or by BNDES together with the PPI. We had the metropolitan region of Maceió, an auction on water and wastewater that was very important. People aren't realizing how much this sanitation portfolio is going to grow in Brazil in the next years because we have so much depth in terms of infrastructure, and because the contracts are being structured with in the right way, let's say, with the right legislation now, and contracts that divide the responsibilities from the public side and the private side, that make very clear which are the revenues for the investor. In each cases, the tariffs will be reviewed, indemnizations, everything is very clear in those contracts. And that's why we had this $400 million concession fee in the auction of Maceió We were asking much less than this. Even the government was surprised with the result, but that shows how much the private sector has the appetite to enter this sanitation opportunity in Brazil. Then we had a smaller project in Cariacica, Espírito Santo, but still very important project. It was an auction not on the highest concession fee, but on the lowest tariff, and we had also a 38% discount. In terms of federal infrastructure, we had a railway contract renewal this year that is very important in terms of capex that will happen in the sector, more than $1.16 billion investment in this renewal with Malha Paulista, with Rumo, the Brazilian enterprise Rumo. Also the auction of BR-101, this highway South Brazil that will bring almost $700 million investments for the region. And we had also two port terminals in the Port of Santos that we had the auction in August. And just yesterday, we were in the Port of Santos with the Minister Tarcísio signing those contracts. Cellulose terminals, essentially, in the Port of Santos, also important investments that will happen. I'll move fast through the next slides to show you some of the opportunities we're structuring. So this is our portfolio right now. You can see that we move strongly with what we already know how to do and is our responsibility. So transportation, energy, oil and gas. But what is interesting when you look at this portfolio is to see how it's getting more diversified. Here you can find public fishery terminals. We weren't working with fishery terminals before, and we had several problems with them in Brazil, depending on public investment. So now we're calling private investors to look at this sector. We have national parks and forests in our portfolio. That's new as well. Even though Brazil has already gone through some PPPs in those sectors, we didn't have federal government with PPI prioritizing this agenda together with the Ministry of Environment. So we have very interesting park opportunities and forest opportunities for PPPs in Brazil. That's new for us. We're going through more diverse projects such as irrigation project. Just yesterday, we opened the public consultation period for an irrigation project in Bahia. That's very challenging for us because we're a team used to work on some specific types of PPPs and privatizations, and now we move forward trying to bring this culture of partnerships to other sectors. And we believe this is very important since we have the knowledge of those different areas in Brazil. We have the teams of the ministries working with us, and we believe that if we can move with those pilot projects through successful auctions and contracts, then each time in Brazil we'll need less public investment, and each time we'll have more private investment with good contracts, and that will be very important for us. You can find also some interesting projects in terms of privatizations. That's an agenda that Minister Paulo Guedes is pushing a lot, and that is very important. So the National Post, I'll present a slide here with some of the enterprises we're structuring. And also we move forward with this help to states and municipalities with their PPPs. So we have sanitation, we have public lighting, we have what we call public social infrastructure with daycares, schools, hospitals, and even prisons. Today, we're signing a contract with the governor of Santa Catarina to move forward with the PPP of an important new prison greenfield project in Blumenau. And other important policies. So I'll leave this presentation with you so that you can get more data, and it is a very detailed presentation, and I don't have the time here to go through all the slides I wanted to go through, but I'll just pinpoint some projects so that you understand the size of our portfolio. So this is a project for next year. We already have the feasibility studies being analyzed by our court of our audit court in Brazil, the TCU, and as soon as we have the approval of the court, they are responsible for checking everything we do to see if the numbers are okay, if we have evaluated well the assets, and if the contracts are respecting all the Brazilian laws of this sector. As soon as we have the okay from the court, we'll publish the bidding documents to have this auction happening probably the first 3 months of 2021. So look at this portfolio. We have 22 airports in 3 different blocks, big airports together with medium airports and smaller airports, and we're expecting to have more than $1.2 billion investments in these airports because of the auction and the private investors. Of course, this is a challenging sector for us this year. It wasn't. It was each time easier to move forward because we're bringing excellent investors to Brazil, and those contracts are going very well. But we had coronavirus, and now we have some uncertainties about the demand of this sector. But even with those uncertainties, we found it was important to move forward with this agenda. Since Brazil is growing so much, we have this huge potential for air transportation growth in Brazil, since we still depend a lot on roads and transportation of people taking days from some region to another. So this is huge potential, even though we have a crisis. It's long-term contract, 30 years. So we'll move forward with those auctions next year. For railways as well, we just had the approval from the TCU, the court of control of this important railway in Bahia called FIOL. It will bring crops and mining from the interior of Bahia to the port of Ilhéus. That will also be a responsibility from the investor, the private investor, to build this port infrastructure. So in the next weeks, we'll publish the bidding documents of FIOL, and we're very motivated with this more than $500 million investment that will happen because of this auction. We're also moving forward with Ferrogrão. That is a very important new railway greenfield project that is already being analyzed in the TCU as well, the audit court. We had the approval of the renewal of important railways from Vale, the Carajás and the Vitória Minas railways. We expect to sign those contracts this year, and then we'll have billions of dollars of new investments in this sector, plus the building of this new railway, FICO, from Goiás to Mato Grosso, almost 400 kilometers of a greenfield railway in Brazil, as a counterpart of the renewal of the contracts of the railways from Vale. So see how much federal government is focusing on the development of Brazilian railways to try to depend each time less on our highways and have this transportation matrix more diverse in Brazil, getting more competitiveness to our exports, and helping population move around easy on other opportunities than just highways in Brazil. But we also need many investments in our highways. We have more than 18,000 kilometers of roads being structured for PPPs in Brazil right now. We expect to have the auction of this BR-163 from Mato Grosso to Pará in the next months. It's already advanced stage being analyzed by the TCU. Also, this important highway, the BR-153 from Goiás to Tocantins, very long highway, 850 kilometers. Those are going to be the next highways. We'll have auctions. Next year, we'll have also the Nova Dutra project that is very important, $3 billion investments. We know how competitive it's going to be. So look at our highways portfolio to understand how many projects are moving forward. We are opening public consultation, finishing feasibility studies, sending them to the audit court, getting the feedback from the audit court, making some adjustments in the projects, publishing the bidding documents, and then moving forward to the auctions. So for sure, 2021 will be a very important year for transportation in terms of auctions. And then we get to the ports agenda, and it is also huge in terms of port terminals that will have auctions. And this year, the 18th December, will be with Minister Tarcísio and his team at the Brazilian stock market, B3, for two important terminals in the port of Aratu, Bahia, one important terminal in Maceió, and one important terminal in Paranaguá. So 4 auctions in the same day. And then we move forward next year also with all those other projects that are being structured. Here in green color, you can see the privatization opportunities that are happening. So for the black ones, those are public administrated ports that we're having the auction for terminals inside the ports. For the green ones, we're studying the whole privatization of the port. So bringing a private investor or a consortium of investors to be responsible for the whole port of the administration and not only the port terminal. And that is very important because we can also consider important investments to access the port through railways, through highways, through other important investments to access all those ports. So this agenda is also very promising. We start with the port of Vitória, Espírito Santo. We'll open the public consultation for those feasibility studies and bidding documents this year. And we expect to have the auction of Codesa next year, 2021. Port of Santos is going through feasibility studies right now. So the auction is expected for 2022. Together with Itajaí, we just had the kickoff last week of those feasibility studies, also expected the auction in 2022. And São Sebastião is another port in São Paulo that is being studied together with the Port of Santos, probably one auction for the 2 ports. I'll go very fast here just to show you that we have small assets and huge assets in our portfolio. Such the Port of Santos is the largest port of South America. The fishery terminals are small, but they're very important for local communities and to develop all the exports of fish in Brazil. You can't believe the opportunity we lose every year in terms of exports because we don't have the right infrastructure to get the fish at the terminal after the fishery. So because we don't have clean treated water and the infrastructure that is needed to get the export certified, then we don't export and we lose tons, literally tons of fish because of this missing infrastructure. So that's why we're helping, even though it's small infrastructure, it's huge impact for Brazil in terms of exports opportunities and even for internal market as well. For energy, we keep on moving with important projects. We'll have the auction in 17th December for transmission facilities. We're expecting 1.5 billion of investments because of those auctions that will happen in December. So very important opportunities as well. We know how competitive those transmission lines auctions are. And we expect to have next year the new generation opportunities. We had to postpone some auctions in the generation side because of the crisis and the impact of the crisis on the energy sector. Also, the oil and gas sector was affected. We are going to have only one auction this year in December as well. But most of our portfolio is going to 21 and 22 because of some changes in the feasibility studies we need to have and some regulatory discussions as well. Mining projects are coming back. We'll have some auctions this year. We already had the studies from Miriri that were approved. So we'll publish those bidding documents. It's a phosphate opportunity in the next weeks. And we expect to have this week the approval also from TCU, our audit court, from this copper opportunity in Goiás. Plus we have the areas from the mining agency that are going to be auctioned this year also. So we're moving in a very interesting way with new mining opportunities in Brazil. And all this is done with a very important care in terms of environmental licensing. So we hear a lot in Brazil how we're being criticized because of the fires and the lack of investments we have to make sure we can protect all our forests and parks, mainly when we have climate situations that bring us to fires. And we are trying to attract each time more also private investment to this sector to help us protect our forests and parks with fire brigades and all types of technology so that we can fight those situations. But also we have an area in the PPI focused on getting those licenses for the important projects. So we know how a highway or a railway or a transmission line such as Manaus Boa Vista can take time because of all the environmental licensing needs. And we know how the legislation in Brazil is in terms of requirements to getting the infrastructure done. So we've been working a lot together with IBAMA, the Ministry of Environment, to get all those infrastructure moving forward in a very responsible way, making sure we get all the legislation observed with all the needs of protection and compensations to get this infrastructure done in Brazil. Then I show quickly here some opportunities of national parks. Those are PPPs basically to attract tourism. So the private sector will have to make some investments and essentially also protect those parks, help us protect all this portfolio of parks in Brazil with technology, with fire brigade, with all that is needed to make sure people can have sustainable visitation and bring tourism and job and investments to those regions in Brazil. We have forests also for visitation, such as Canela and São Francisco de Paula. I didn't mention we'll have an auction from Aparados da Serra and Serra Geral the 15th December. So our first auction is already happening this year, 2 important parks, South Brazil. Those forests here for visitation are being analyzed by the TCU. Feasibility studies are done. We have concessions of forests as well. It's different than visitation because here we're looking for sustainable management. And we will probably have our first auction in the first months of next year. That will be Humaitá in the Amazon. I mentioned the irrigation perimeter in Bahia. We opened yesterday the consultation, so you can come to our website and look at all the feasibility studies, the bidding documents, and send your contributions. We have this for all projects in Brazil, the opportunity for investors and for anyone that is interested in this agenda to contribute with criticizing the project or sending some suggestions to make the project better. So this is the moment for IRC. We have the 5G technology auction that will happen next year also, and that will be fundamental to bring new investments for Brazil in this sector. This is a sector that invests a lot. Every year we're talking about something around 30 billion reais, 35 billion reais in terms of investments in this sector. And with the 5G auction, we expect to have even more investments from 21 on. So basically 4 great years of investments because of this auction. Then we have privatization agenda. We know how much Eletrobras is important for government, the capitalization of this enterprise. We need an approval from Brazilian Congress. We are already moving forward with the liquidation of this smaller enterprise, South Brazil, SEITEC, and those other 2 enterprises from the Ministry of Economy, Engenharia and ABGF. Also, we expect to have some results from the feasibility studies of those privatizations in the beginning of next year. Then we have the ports I mentioned. We have some enterprises from urban trains that also feasibility studies are moving forward, and very important enterprises such as the National Post, data companies such as Serpro, Dataprev, Telebras, telecommunication enterprise that are being studied for privatizations next year. Then just to finish, I'll talk a bit about the opportunities we have in terms of sanitation and public infrastructure, social infrastructure. Those are projects that we're structuring together with states and municipalities. So basically, we keep on moving forward with important public lighting opportunities, and we'll have many other auctions happening from this year to 2021. Sewage opportunities, water collection, and also some solid waste PPPs that we're structuring that are very important. Urban drainage pilot projects that we're structuring that can be very important also for investments in this sector in Brazil. Then we have the daycare, as I mentioned. We're working with some pilot opportunities. We're trying to move forward with the hospitals agenda. We had some noise in Brazil regarding this agenda in the last weeks, but we expect to come back to that and help the states and municipalities with hospital PPPs and even prison opportunities. I just have 2 slides I want to show you. Those are the opportunities in terms of basic sanitation. We already have here in yellow what happened this year, Alagoas and Cariacica. And then very important to talk about this Rio de Janeiro project. BNDES has been working hard with the state of Rio to publish those bidding documents and to have this auction in the beginning of next year. Almost $7 billion investments. Almost $7 billion investments, almost 14 million people that will get the right conditions of water distribution and sewage collection and treatment with this auction. We expect to bring the best investors of the world to this project. And this is a game changing Brazil in terms of what is going to happen in this sector, in the sanitation sector. And then other states that are being structured right now, such as the state of Acre, Amapá, Rio Grande do Sul. So BNDES keeps moving forward with other feasibility studies, and we already have the consultation happening in the state of Amapá. So we already have the feasibility studies and the bidding documents in the step of public consultation. And also Caixa Econômica Federal has important projects in terms of sanitation, not only water and sewage, but also solid waste. So many projects are happening. We expect to have this consortia here in Minas Gerais of 9 cities for public waste PPP happening in the first months of next year. And it will be our first PPP of public services regarding solid waste. So this is very important because when the project goes well, then we can scale the opportunity, structuring many other projects all over Brazil. So this is it. I had many slides to detail, but not much time. So just to finish showing you the auctions we expect to have this year. So it's not finished yet. We still have auctions to come. I have mentioned them during our presentation: transmission line, port opportunities, renewal contracts in railways, mining opportunities, parks. But I believe what is more important, and I swear this is my last slide, is the auctions that we're structuring for 2021. So look at the size of this portfolio. And this is not just a wishing list. This is all being structured right now. All those assets have consultants working on them to make the feasibility studies, the bidding documents. And this is what we expect to have as opportunities for infrastructure and privatizations in 2021. So sorry if I took too long, but the presentation will be available here for any need you have. Thank you. Okay, so thank you so much for this opportunity. We'll come back in a few moments with a roundtable. So thank you again.
Welcome everyone to this roundtable about export and agency finance Brazil trends. I'm Thomas Burks, head of structured trade and export finance at Santander in Brazil. This event is part of Santander Chama live series. In case you want to watch more about our content, you can activate the alert option on your YouTube channel. It is a great honor to host this digital roundtable, right? Formed by important stakeholders of export finance business with ECAs here today, exporters and importers view as well. These are indeed unique times and challenging ones. Global trade has been struggling to be a booster to economies, as it has been in the past years, but we still have a light in the end of the tunnel. Talking about today's specific topic, in the very recent TXF Export Finance Industry Report, prior to COVID-19, there was a positive outlook for the year. After relatively flat 2019, banks expressed appetite to increase export finance lending activity in Latin America. Look at the sectors. Banks surveyed in this report that they are set up to increase their activity in the telecommunications, 5G, metals and mining, and petrochemical, with exporters and importers looking to do more in manufacturing, oil and gas, and infrastructure. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has damped this outlook, causing many to shift their relative optimism to a downbeat outlook for the next 12 months of the industry. Hence, today's objective is to discuss the trends for this market targeting the Brazilian market in specifics. Well, with no further delay, I would like to present the speakers for today's debate. Let me start with the ladies, of course, and the French ladies. Well, today we have here with us Myriam Cosnier. Myriam has been working for 25 years in the export credit insurance market. She worked at COFAS for the State Export Guarantees Directorate, where she occupied several positions, among which head of department in the aircraft financing sector from 2007 to 2009. And since 2017, she works for BPI France, in the subsidiary of BPI France Assurance Export, which took over the role as the French ACA. She's the head of department for the international expertise products, in charge of developing new products for banks and exporters, SMEs and key accounts, on the relationship with other ECAs and the private insurance companies, Bernie Union, Reinsurance Global Frameworks, and are providing support to the French authorities in international negotiations relating to export credit insurance, European Union, OECD framework, and IWG. Laure Duvernay. Laure is the head of project finance in Alcatel Submarine Networks. During 13 years, she was at CACIP, acting as a commercial director for the large corporate team. Laure holds a bachelor degree of science and specialization in space telecommunications for UCL, an associate's degree in mathematics and physics from Lycée Janson de Sailly, Paris. Danilo Garcés is currently the CFO of Braskem Idesa. The company is the largest producer of polyethylene in Mexico. During 2014 and 2018, held the position of a corporate finance director of Braskem SA in Brazil, encompassing several finance responsibilities, including the dedicated area of ACA financing. Peter Luque-Beaumet is a senior advisor for the project and customer financing in Siemens Energy, which includes ECA and project financings for SC customers and own ventures. He joined Siemens in 2017 to lead power project developments toward bankability and facilitate efficient financing processes on the side of Germany's largest exporters. Peter currently focuses on the large-scale integrated power projects in Latin America and Africa. Prior to his assignment in Siemens, Peter built up the National American Infrastructure and Energy debt and equity portfolio in DIEG Invest, part of the KfW banking group, seeking to enable renewable energy efficiency projects besides to other infrastructure investments on the highest ESG standards. He worked for more than 2 decades in the structured and corporate finance teams in West LB, leading ample finance mandates in Latin America, including work out of Brazil, at the time his privatization of major utilities in Brazil took place. Peter holds a degree in general banking and applied economics from Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. Well, so with the further delay, I would like to pose the first question for you guys this morning. And it couldn't be different, right? I mean, no, the COVID has brought up, as I said before, a lot of new moments to the industry, right? I mean, I'd like to hear with you, Myriam, what are the outlook that you see as an ECA powerhouse? What are the trends that you see? What are the main products that you had before the COVID? And actually, what was the action plan for BPI France after the COVID? And how do you see the market going forward, especially for Brazil, right? The floor is yours, Myriam.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you very much for inviting me at this roundtable and to represent the French ECA in this Trans-Brazil. As you said, Thomas, BPI France Export Insurance is the French ECA since 2017 now. It was transferred from OFAS, which is still an export credit insurance, private export credit insurance still existing, to BPI France Group, which is 100% detained by the state directly or indirectly through the Caisse des dépôts et consignations. So we are in a dedicated subsidiary. The persons were transferred, the portfolio, the products, so there is a total continuity between what ProFast used to do and what BPI France Export Insurance does as an ECA. So we are, as you know, working in the framework of the OECD arrangement and recommendations for medium and long-term credit, and under the EU regulations regarding, for example, state aids and so on. As an ECA, what we see, the trends that we see is that it is less and less the usual buyer export credit insurance that we are implementing. We have to be more and more flexible in our products and in our way of managing and selling our products. Buyer credit is still the major product for bigger tickets where there is a national content, so French content, and our requirement is always to have a minimum 20% French content to maximize our support. For smaller tickets, we can offer credit, insurance supplier credit with a discount of receivables that we can also cover. And what we would like very much to develop is credit lines where we have one buyer and because it's an economy of scale, and but for that it requires a minimum of export contracts with the same buyer. We used to do it with Petrobras, for example, and we are very much willing to develop this kind of products. We also try to implement more flexibility in the approach regarding the French content requirements with what we have called the Pass Export Diploma, which is a global answer to the French content requirements, with a tailor-made partnership between the French state and the exporter. Thanks to our next ante global analysis instead of an operation by operation process of French content analysis. And we take into consideration the company's profile and specificities, research and development, and so on. And when the exporter has this pass export, he knows that he will get a maximized financing covered amount within the OECD rules, of course, as usual. Regarding flexibility, what we have also implemented is the capacity to cover local contracts, what we call insurance to local subsidiaries. The principle is that a French subsidiary set up or has a subsidiary in Brazil, for example, and it can conclude a contract with a local buyer, and we are able to cover this contract provided that there is the minimum 20% French content given through subcontractors, for example, the mother company, and so on. We can deliver this provided that it is a legal requirement, either a legal requirement or that it is necessary to win the contract. And in order to be able to assess this is something that we are going to check with the French economic counselor that is based in the country, in Brazil. Otherwise, the conditions are the same as it is under usual export credit financing. What we also have developed is the Untitled guarantee with an approach that is not French content linked to French content, but to a French interest for the French economy. This type of guarantee doesn't come into the OECD arrangement. It's untied guarantee, and as such, it has a lower percentage of cover for the exporter, which is 80%. But it's very flexible in terms of schemes. We can cover investors, exporters, off-takers, and so on. And it can come as an additional tranche, for example, to a usual buyer credit. So that's for our usual products in the usual context, I would say. Regarding the situation, the COVID situation, what we have tried to do is to simplify our process, to be very close and listening to the needs of our exporters in order that they feel they are supported, they feel supported in the difficulties that they encounter because of COVID. What we accept is debt holidays. In certain sectors, we had a global approach, for example, for aircraft or cruise sectors. Otherwise, it's on a case-by-case basis. And what we have done that people do not see, but that is very, very important, is that we have set up a reinsurance scheme for private insurers so that they maintain their credit lines and the intercompany credits so that the economy still runs. And that is what we call Cap France Export. We support by these reinsurance schemes COFAS, Euler Hermes, Groupama, AXA, and Atradius, which are the major players in the credit insurance in France. So that's the main measures that we have taken because of the COVID crisis. I don't know if I still have time and you want me to continue, or I give the floor to my colleagues.
Thanks, Miriam. It was super interesting, your explanation, and thanks for sharing with us this morning. It's interesting to see that BPI was, in a sense, we've noted that the progress and flexibility even before COVID. So probably you were even ready to step in to support, as you say, the exporters, of course, importers, but also increasing programs that were already, to some flexibility and always to support. So I'm not sure if Peter or Laure, you have any comments from exporter view. From your side, you want to share the latest on what you've seen in COVID, or you want me to already shoot the question to Danilo in the second session?
Yeah, I can also give and share my experience during this COVID crisis. We have some power project going on, constructions going on, where Siemens Energy acts as equipment supplier or as EPC contractor even. So just in the middle of the construction process, we were basically hit also by all the effects of COVID, with interruptions, with additional efforts to secure a workforce and to keep construction some way up and going. On the overall timeline, that's certainly something which has an effect eventually also on the financing. So we found that ECAs and in our case also with Euler Hermes, they showed great flexibility and great understanding of discussing this issue and helping overall the project all the way through this crisis, as Miriam mentioned, by debt holidays or extensions on completion times and so on. So basically, it wasn't very much of a discussion. Things were explained, all the efforts were explained. They really want to know that sponsors keep committed to the project. And I think the best for all parties is then really to take the time and to move on as fast as possible. So we see great support also here from the banking community. We do another project also with the help of Santander, And also there, obviously, putting a financing together is these days is quite a challenge, but still we find good interest on the banking side, even in this COVID crisis, to go along with the projects and reaching the finishing line. So thanks to the banking community here.
Nice. Thanks for sharing too, Peter, your experience. I mean, we would note it also on our side what you say about this anti-cycle aspect of ECA financing, which needs to be in place with COVID, and we've seen that happening. Banks were also, as you say, flexible and happy to support their clients, right? But yes, I mean the anti-cyclical cycle element of ECA is super important, especially in these times, right? Alok, I think that you probably want to have your give a bit of sharing with us too.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the support of the banking community, I think my experience is similar to that of Peter. We've got extremely good support from all our financial partners. Our factories had to close, but not for so much time. So in terms of the plan of work and the actually evolution of the projects, we were not so much harmed. And if anything, in a way, the fact that a lot of countries and cities had to lock down evidenced the need for better connectivity and higher bandwidth. So this advocates also for, laying more submarine cables. So in a way, in this difficult phase, our business has suffered less than other industries, I think. But of course, we hope to go back to a very normal situation in the next month. But we were rather preserved, I think, in this current environment.
Yeah, that's important aspect that you say about supporting at the end of the day the exporting element and the jobs, at least maintenance, I would say, right? So yes, super. Thanks for sharing also. So yeah, I think I see Danilo is already waiting for my question, right? So Danilo, now in Mexico City, right? But a long time in Brazil too. You have both experience from let's say a corporate finance, but also project financing, dealing with ECAs and multilaterals, right? I would like to we've been following about the story about building up ECA capabilities within the firm. I would like to listen from you, your experience about how was your decision making process, right? And what has been the experience so far, both dealing in Braskem as a corporate finance and also in Braskem with this project finance, if you can share with us.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you, Thomas, and the Santander team for the invitation, the opportunity to share our experience. I mean, first comment for you is, in Braskem, we always had an area that was needed to BNDES because the other opportunities that we were looking at were not as competitive or as relevant as we could have when BNDES had a relevant role for Brazilian corporates in Brazil. However, through time, first of all, the history with BNDES has changed for quite a good time, and then we saw that we needed to adjust our strategy and advance with other alternatives. So let me just comment a little bit about our finance strategy in a very simple way. So as we are in a very capital-intensive industry, we need to look for long-term financing and competitive financing. That comes, in our view, mainly from capital markets and also ECA financing. I mean, we will not see banks financing us for 5-7 years or more with competitive rates. That being said, we focused our debt area or financing area in those two fronts: capital markets, which was already quite well structured, and ECA financing, where we needed to develop the relationships with other ECAs. We need to understand the products they have available. we need to understand also the incentives they have. So, for instance, Miriam told us a lot about what BPI is doing. Most of that knowledge is not within the finance areas of most companies here. So this is one of the parts that we need to focus on to understand. It's not simple. So having a group within the finance team that is dedicated to understand what are the products available could generate a lot of opportunities. And that was one of the things that we started to do. We advanced in Braskem, let's say, a lot in the last years. But understanding that from a finance perspective was very limited because we needed the relationship with the supplier. So the engineering areas, the procurement areas of the company needed to have the right incentive for us to access that funding. They could not be focused only in buying in the technical decision. The financing factor should be considered by the engineering and also by the procurement team. So that was one of the tools that we have implemented. But we needed to make sure that that incentive was not only from the finance team, but also within the perspective. That's within that. So within that strategy, our relationship became more closed in the sense that the procurement team had to present financing alternatives for each one of the purchases. So that was the link we did. Another link that I think in our experience through time we could develop is, bidding process. So entering specifically to the procurement and supplier work. In the bidding process, we asked the team to put there also the financing considerations for us to look at this in the total cash flow of the project or the investment. So having this contact in advance with the supplier and also linking this to the financing strategy in advance was also a way of work that changed a lot for us, the dynamic with ECA agencies, and helped us build relationship with them. Okay, so this is one part that I can tell you around this connection with supply and procurement team. But we also needed in the finance area to understand better what are the products available. So even without a direct relationship, we had very clear goals of understanding products from different ECAs on a global basis. I mean, we took 10 out of the biggest ECAs globally, and independent of the fact that we have or not the flavor, let's see what types of products they have. That type of work indirectly helped us to say, look, this ECA here has something very competitive for us. We would go to the supply team and say, guys, can we develop a supplier that can generate this flavor? So we were able to build not only from the supplier side, from the procurement area to the finance team, but also from the finance team to the procurement area. So this is another work that we did that could generate also indirectly generated some opportunities. And then from that, we also had some directly opportunities that was generated. For instance, some ECAs generated products that for Braskem was, look, I don't have the flavor, but I will incentivize, I will provide with the funding, with the commitment for you to development suppliers and having specific meetings with our main providers for a certain region in order for them to present to you what they can offer and for you to see whether you can use or not their products. So this is another way that you can develop and you can extract more value about ECA financing, around ECA financing that we did. So I can mention to you some examples. We had a relevant project in the United States, Delta, which is a polypropylene plant, more than $700 million investment, where, you know, the combination of the technical aspect and also the financing support was decisive. And I can tell you that one of the most competitive funding that Braskem has ever raised came from this project, from this discussion. And then, I mean, I can mention other comments, but I'll leave for you to ask additional points. But not everything about ECA is great. So we need to think about the complexities. Yeah, I mean, contract is usually contract covenants or and operational limitations, very strict discussions. I think with time we need to build more flexibility within the ECAs, because one thing that we were analyzing is, look, for instance, for project finance, that financing is very competitive, but this is a financing that will support construction period. When you come to when the company is operating, I'll have to take out, but maybe the market won't be that positive. So the limitations and constraints of the financing that the ECA brings could generate the company to have a takeout in not a very competitive way, just to avoid the burden of the contractual burden. So this is another point that we have included in our analysis on the long run, because sometimes you can take, you know, short-term decisions and say, look, it's funding is competitive, let's go for it. But when you see the contract and the limitations, that will make your life, you know, very challenging after construction period, when you have to run the business, right? And then the long-term competitive funding is not exactly long-term, because if you have to take it out at a certain period, it doesn't make much sense. So and I understand that you have a lot of clients here hearing us, Thomas. I would say also take care on the commitments, on the contract covenants, on what you sign, and push a lot the agencies for them to be more flexible. That's another commitment. That's one suggestion. The other suggestion, the positive side, is within the company, try to guarantee that the procurement team, the engineering team, and the finance team work together. The financing is not a commitment or an obligation or to do from the finance area. It's for the whole company. So you have to integrate the interest. The incentive should be very well aligned. So I think those are two main comments, or a few main comments for you, Thomas. I hope to have addressed your question.
No, you had indeed. Thanks for sharing. And as you say, everything in financing, in life, is pros and cons, right? I mean, it's good that you put both the benefits and also the challenging aspects. I mean, and of course, in your experience of corporate and also project financing, right? I mean, it's important to also look about whenever project is operating, things may change from initial perspective and projections of the project that may be, in a sense, probably in your case, better than they were initially thought, right? So it's good to have the flexibility. We do see as a financier that coming, right? But I also wanted to listen here to Laure and to Peter, if you have any, in your experience. And Peter, you've worked also in Brazil, so from your side, and what Danilo was saying, for me, it's super important about putting all the stakeholders together about the importer, but the importer, you have to connect with all the procurement team, the engineering, but also on the exporter side, you also have to, on your side, of course, you have to connect with the sales team and probably the engineering team, right? So how do you work around that advisory role when you're pushing towards a ECA-led financing, right? And then how, what are the challenges? I mean, local currency, regulatory framework, and so on, competition from other sources of fund that may not be the best for the exporter side, right? I mean, how do you work around those aspects too?
Yeah, right. Thanks, Thomas. So I can just confirm what Danilo said, that you have to integrate the entire team, not only from the engineering side, but certainly also from the financing side, which in not only a few cases can make the competitive difference to win or to lose a project. So we start very early on within Siemens Energy of getting our sales teams involved and making them aware about the requirements, and also giving them indications on which financing costs can be expected. So we have them early stage in. We make them aware about the requirements of sourcing if it comes to ECA financing. Well, and then we go out together to the client and make a pitch for a good offer. The way of structuring a financing, and on that side, I'm still a banker, and look what's ideal for the project. If I look at the power projects in Brazil, I would definitely say most of their revenues is made in Brazilian reais. So structuring financing towards eliminating foreign exchange risk is one of the key and most foremost important things in a financing. Second, tapping on long-term financing, so avoid short-term rollover needs. That's another source. With these two requirements, you very easily end up with a BNDES financing. So in one case, we, however, managed, and it was basically the first time at least for Hermes, to go out and to provide a foreign currency cover for financing. So the structure looks like that BNDES would provide a long-term and a very competitive loan to the project. And instead of classifying it as a project financing, we developed a structure whereas BNDES would accept the basically bank guarantee, which is ultimately covered by ECA cover from Euler Hermes as their guarantee. Obviously, overall, that substantially improved and helped on the risk rating within BNDES, so that the project could retain very competitive terms from BNDES, and also benefit from the very long tenors in Brazilian reais that are very difficult to find somewhere else in the market, in Brazil, at least those days. Just these days, and Thomas aware of that, we're looking at another project where we will see to develop further from that step. And one of the important things for the ECA business these days certainly is also to look at other liquidity pockets that are out there. I mean, we are well aware that there's more like a lack of good assets, and there's a tremendous amount of liquidity, but we have to make them fit to the project. We have to make them accept project completion risk. So we try to do that by the help of ECA financing with a first-class ECA cover from Hermes again. So we would like to see that ECAs in general would be more open to other financing products than just bank financing. So it could be sort of like project debentures or other means of liquidity to enjoy this kind of cover. Because these days we and Santander also showed it to us, there's also from other investors appetite in long-term financing, in particular infrastructure financing, to go ahead. Also coming to your initial question on the crisis and the COVID situation, I think particularly these days, having a project financing still with all the collateral package, with all the contractual arrangements, and then getting a revenue stream from a well-organized, in this case, Brazilian electricity market. So that makes it overall for a very interesting asset class to many investors. But yeah, the challenge is really to bring the liquidity to the project, to make it fit all the needs, and to go ahead. So that's where I see the challenge. Overall, I can say the great benefit really was to have long-term financing in local currency with a long-term and attractive interest rate. I think that in addition to a good product and an attractive sales price is a winning factor for from the perspective of an exporter these days.
Thanks very much, Peter, for sharing your knowledge, I would say, right? I mean, vast, I would say. I would like to, to go to our third round here, and of course we can continue on discussing here the exporter view, right? I mean, so Laura, if you want to continue the topic, but I also would like to hear from you your views about what is your outlook for the coming year and the coming years. And of course, how do you see Brazil? How do you see the region? What are your outlook? And Miriam, if you want also to comment afterwards, please feel free.
Yeah, well, thanks, Thomas. I think through its population, the demand, its geographical location, Brazil is key in the submarine industry. At this stage, we currently have 12 cables landing in Brazil, and quite a lot more either being currently built or in contract negotiation stage. So there is definitely a real dynamic in this region that is driven both by the demand, by the need for resiliency, by the need to build new routes. There is of course the obvious route of LATAM to the US, but we are now seeing cables that link directly LATAM to Europe, or even LATAM to Asia, from Chile in particular. So there is definitely a demand in the region, and we're very confident that we're going to have a lot of business in the coming years. Now, when just along with the comments of Peter and Danilo, I think for us, the support of our financial partners and ECA in particular is key in addressing all this demand, because as has been described before, the financing offer is more often than not part and parcel of the global offer. My main clients basically are the sales teams. And in this respect, we are also relying on the upstream support that we can get from our financial partners or ECA partners to show our clients the kind of solution we can bring and the kind of flexibility we can bring as well. So this is all key, and it's key already now, and it's going to become more and more key, I think, in the coming years. And it's, as Miriam said, I think at the beginning, it's also very important for us to understand that we have to move away from the standard credit buyer credits, and go to more diverse solutions in order to address the specificities of the countries. If we think about Brazil, for example, dealing with a Brazilian client on the Brazilian market means that there is a currency matter to be addressed, there is a tax matter to be addressed, there is legal employment laws that we are a beginner in Brazil in a way, conversely to Peter, so we don't necessarily know all the ins and outs, but we are relying on our financial partners and on the ECA to be able to support us in really doing business in that environment. So for me, it all goes through an upstream cooperation with the different players. and also really good preparation of the field so as to be able to succeed. So, and this cannot be achieved if we don't A, work together, and B, really understand the ins and outs. I mean, Brazil is true, it's a specific country with a lot of regulations, but the ends at stake are huge, and for us it's definitely a field where we want to succeed. So we're counting on Santander's and our partners to do it.
Thanks, Laure. It's interesting. What we say in Brazil, we have a little fruit here that probably only grows in Brazil. It's called jabuticaba. So we normally have our own jabuticabas. That's what you say. So count on us. I mean, we are seen as the most, I think, international bank amongst the local banks, or the most local banks amongst international. So please do count on us. But Mirin, I mean, just following on the question. I mean, and I would like to also to listen to you about your perspectives towards the country, the region. How do you plan ahead for Brazil, right?
So as already said, Brazil is a huge market with huge opportunities. What I can say from the presence of the French exports is that we have too low exports to Brazil. I think that the competition is very strong among ECAs, with less and less level playing field between the OECD ECAs and the other ECAs. As Danilo said, the way of working of the buyers are changing. They are looking at the ECA products and then adapt their strategy according, and the suppliers they are seeking for according to the ECA products. So we really have to think and to act differently in the ECA world. That is to say, to go and meet the buyers, to promote our exporters, and to have people locally to be able to speak to the buyers. On BPI France side, we have 2 people based in Mexico that represents us there, and that are always available to travel when they can, to travel and meet the buyers, and to promote French exports. So, and that is a tendency that we see in all ECAs that are either doing trips when they can, again, to the countries to meet buyers, or either setting up representative office locally to be close to the buyers. So there is a real change. And the second change that we see also is that the OECD arrangement has to be reformed, and that more and more products are developing out of the OECD arrangement. The untied guarantee, all ECAs have an untied guarantee. Direct lenders, some of the countries have. We don't have in France, but we have a we don't have direct buyers, but direct lenders, but we have this untied guarantee where we can come as an additional product to usual buyer credit. What we see also is more and more the tendency to require local contracts to be covered. That is to say that French companies have to set up local subsidiaries to be able to conclude contracts. So we tried to address all these points. I don't think that COVID will change anything regarding these tendencies. We are very much aware that China is really very aggressive in terms of supporting their exports, and I think we have to also have a European approach to this. That is to say, try to maybe think European, to be more efficient, to address some countries maybe with a European content that would maximize the support. Or I think we have to really think another way now, as the ECA world is changing very much these last years.
Thanks, Miriam. Again, I mean, very interesting to listen to your perspective about the. I write down the flexibility, right? I mean, that's probably what you leave as a message for us, right? We're reaching the our final round here, but before final remarks, and I will. I think Danilo, you wanted to talk about ESG a little bit. I mean, environmental, social governance, and then we can go to our final remarks and close the session.
So my comment to that, Thomas, and thank you for the question. More recently, Braskem had announced a very bold commitment to be neutral carbon emission, I mean, by 2050. This is a multiple year investment program. Many companies are following this the same direction, and many others, especially in our industry, the petrochemical industry, will have to follow. This is definitely a opportunity for the ECAs to understand what the investments that will be necessary, which are tremendous. The company is committed. I mean, the company has very clearly defined this goal, and those investments will be done. It's in a large period, and this is a trend in the sector. I mean, in several sectors. I mean, in any sector, I would say. So that would be my comment on the ESG side. Braskem has not only on the carbon neutral, on the carbon side, but emission side, but also on the circular economy, several commitments that are ESG linked. Circular economy for us is a priority, and not only for Braskem, but for the industry as a whole. So I'll leave those two points to the group here for you to think about opportunities on that area that I'm sure we will have a lot.
Very nice. Yeah, ESG is a hot topic these days, right? I mean, I must say that probably for the ECA and multilateral in the space, I would say this is not new. But of course, the naming of ESG may be something new, but it's not that people don't know. The industry has been doing this for a while, but it's good that you share, especially because the industry where you're in is probably people are with a big eyes on it, right? So, okay, thanks for sharing and for your final remarks, Danilo. Peter, any final remarks on your side?
Can just confirm that ESG is also of utmost important to Siemens, in addition to the good governance and compliance issues, because the reason for that is really if there's a problem, it's very difficult to correct it later on. So you have to get it right from the very first beginning. And Siemens Energy, as international and global corporation, is very much in the focus of NGOs. So we start out with checks on that, really making sure that we understand the project the right way. I mean, the external factor is something. The other thing is really it helps and puts a good sanity on the project and helps to avoid problems during construction, and allows all the folks, all the employees and the engineers on the site really to work the right way, to stay disciplined and avoid any incidences on the construction site. which at the end helps to meet the deadline of a project and overall adds to the quality as EPC and provider. So yeah, very happy to confirm this is of utmost importance.
Thank you, Peter. And Laure, any final remarks from your side before we open the French wine bottle?
Very soon. It's a bit early though, but yeah, never too early. No, no, maybe just a few words on Brazil. I mean, it's a very promising market for ISN, and it's also a challenging one, but we are relying on our technology and on our partners to actually succeed. I think in this instance, we need to look at the challenges more as opportunities, and we need to be proactive and creative to circumvent the specificities of this country and to deserve our share of the market. So there's a lot of work to do, but we are willing to do it, both with Miriam, Thomas, and all the other teams. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the words. Miriam, any final remark from your side before we close?
Yes, my final remark will be on ESG because it's also a real stake for us. We are in the process of doing the taxonomy of our portfolio, which is a very big work. We work with the European groups on this, with the European Investment Bank, among others. So climate change is a real subject here at BPI France. On the export credit side, on the internal side, it's really one of the main challenges in the next years, as well as digitalization. I think these are both big topics that we have to address in the following months. I would say, I would not say in the following years, but really in the following months. And we are waiting for directives from the governments regarding oil and gas and what we can do, what we cannot do in the following years.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's really an honor to talk to you this morning. Unfortunately, we're reaching the final minutes here with you. I think we have some topics to continue talking, maybe in the next few months, next year, in an event. If I may say, the only good thing that COVID has brought to us is bringing these events. We have at least four. We're based in 4 different cities this morning, right? I mean, in France, Mexico City, Germany, and Brazil. And this is the only good thing that I may say, that we have to learn about being more together and sharing more information in a digital way, as you say, Miriam. For us, also, digitization of trade as a whole is super important for us. We have been working here at Santander also on that topic, and it's super important for us. We have made some acquisitions in fintechs and so on in the past year, I would say. So for us, yes, it's super important, not only in the export finance, but trade as a whole. So this event normally would happen, and the idea of this export finance trend, something that we have done in France, as probably you've seen, physically speaking. So I would like to thank my colleague in Paris, Marcos Reda, who's actually the one that triggered the process, together with Sergio Margutti. You've probably seen most of the morning appearing all the videos here. So he was also the putting this together with our marketing team. So no, I thank all of you also to joining us, Miriam, Laure, Peter, and Danilo. And hope to see you in a few months' time discussing this very super important topic for us.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Stay
Thomas.
safe, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.